On a dark February night in 1978, 5 friends set out on an ordinary trip to watch a basketball game. They were laughing, joking, and making plans for the future. None of them had any reason to think it would be their last carefree night. Within hours, they would vanish into the brutal wilderness of Northern California, leaving behind only a trail of impossible questions. Their story would go down in history as one of America's greatest unsolved mysteries, so bizarre it has been called the American Dyatlov Pass. The men were known as the Yuba County Five. Their names were Ted Weiher, Jack Madruga, William Bill Sterling, Jack Hoot, and Gary Mathias. They were between 24 and 32 years old, each from small towns around Yuba County, California. They weren't drifters or criminals. They were ordinary young men with extraordinary quirks. 4 of them had mild intellectual disabilities. Gary was a Vietnam veteran living with schizophrenia, yet together they were inseparable. They loved sports, camping, and most of all, basketball. The night of February 24th, they had only one plan: drive to Chico, cheer on the college basketball team, grab some snacks, and head straight home. After the game ended, they were seen stopping at a convenience store. Candy bars, soda, and snacks were tossed into the car. The clock ticked past 10 p.m. as they piled back into Jack Madruga's prized Mercury Montego turquoise and white sedan. He babied like a child. They had a special game of their own the very next morning, part of an amateur basketball league for people with disabilities. Their uniforms were laid out at home. Their parents knew they wouldn't miss it for the world. And yet, somehow, instead of driving south to Yuba City, they took a strange turn northeast, into the dark, snowy mountains near Oroville. By the next morning, the men still weren't home. Families began calling each other in panic. This wasn't like them. Soon, the police were notified. Searches began, but no one could imagine what lay ahead. Days later, authorities stumbled upon the first clue: Madruga's Mercury Montego, abandoned on a remote mountain dirt road 70 miles from Chico, lodged in snow. The car wasn't wrecked. It had a quarter tank of gas left. The keys were gone, but the doors were unlocked. Inside were candy wrappers and soda cans, the remains of the snack run. Nothing was stolen. This car hadn't broken down. It had been deserted. That simple fact sparked the first hook of the mystery. Why would 5 men walk away from a perfectly working car, in freezing weather, with no jackets, and no reason to be there? Investigators scratched their heads. The car wasn't stuck badly. Anyone could have pushed it free. The wheels showed no sign of spinning, no desperate attempt to escape the snow. It was as if the car was calmly parked and left behind in the middle of nowhere, in the middle of the night. People instantly drew parallels to the bizarre Russian Dyatlov Pass case, where young hikers abandoned their tents in deadly cold for reasons no one could understand. Here it was again, but in the United States. 5 men going into the snow, only to vanish. Search teams scoured the mountains with helicopters and dogs. They combed trails and forest roads, but no footprints, no sign of the men appeared. Then came the rumors. Locals claimed they saw the men near the mountains after the basketball game. Others said they might have been with a stranger. Each claim only added to the confusion. For weeks, the Yuba Five were simply gone. But then, with the arrival of spring thaw, horror began to surface. On June 4th, a man driving through the area stopped near a deserted Forest Service trailer deep in the woods, almost 20 miles from where the car was found. Inside, he stumbled upon a nightmare: the body of Ted Weiher, emaciated, wrapped in sheets, alone. His beard growth revealed he had lived for up to 13 weeks after the night the group vanished. That meant Ted had survived in agonizing isolation long after the others began dying off. But what he left behind made the story even darker. The trailer was stocked with survival supplies. Dozens of canned meals sat neatly stacked on shelves, blankets, clothing, a propane heater. Everything needed to survive was sitting there in plain sight. And yet, Ted had starved to death, dropping from 200 pounds to barely 120. He hadn't even opened the cans, because the simple can opener that sat inches away on a countertop went untouched. Wrapped in thin sheets, fingers frozen stiff, Ted suffered in silence, surrounded by everything he needed to live. It was not just death, it was madness. Nearby, searches uncovered more bodies. Madruga and Sterling were found partially eaten by wildlife, frozen in snow less than a dozen miles from the car. A few days later, the spine and bones of Hoot were found scattered across the hillside. 4 men from the group were officially accounted for. But the 5th, Gary Mathias, was gone. His tennis shoes had been found inside the trailer. He had swapped into Ted's larger shoes, likely to travel through the snow. But Gary himself disappeared entirely. To this day, no body, no trace, no closure. Gary Mathias simply walked off the page of history. The discoveries made the case even stranger. Why did the men abandon the car when waiting inside could have saved them? Why march 20 miles through harsh snow at night with no winter gear into treacherous terrain? Why did Ted, near death, ignore food and warmth inside the trailer? Why was Gary the only one never found? Every question circled back to madness, coercion, or something more sinister. Theories sprang up like wildfire. One said foul play was involved. Perhaps the men fell into the hands of mountain criminals who lured them into the woods. But there were no signs of violence, no robbery. Another theory: the men simply got lost, but 70 miles off their route, up roads none of them knew. Unbelievable. Some investigators suspected Gary, a Vietnam vet struggling with schizophrenia. Maybe he convinced his friends to follow him into the mountains on a paranoid rant where they found themselves trapped. But that didn't explain why Weiher lived for months in a trailer filled with supplies that went unused, nor why Gary never resurfaced. Police even explored the possibility that the men were running from something that night. Witnesses in the area recalled an eerie, unsettling detail: loud noises in the mountains, lights in the woods, shadowy figures wandering. Some claimed they saw the men themselves at odd hours of the night. Hours suggested that they were fleeing someone or something. It gave the entire case a supernatural undertone, fueling comparisons to Dyatlov Pass, where strange lights in the sky and unexplained injuries drove endless theories of UFO contact. Could the Yuba Five have stumbled into something as bizarre and incomprehensible as the Russians decades before? The most tragic part is that this mystery wasn't destined. It wasn't a storm sweeping hikers off a mountain like Dyatlov. It wasn't an avalanche or military cover-up. It was 5 young men on a Friday night, just going home after enjoying a basketball game, bags of candy in their laps, laughter in their car. And in just a few decisions we still can explain, they drove off the edge of routine and into a legend that haunts California to this day. The grieving families never found peace. Ted's loved ones were tormented, knowing he suffered for months, starving next to untouched food. Madruga's mother insisted until her death that her son would never abandon his Karit, was his pride and joy. The parents of Hoot spoke about how their childlike son adored life and couldn't understand why fate treated him so cruelly. And Gary's family, decades later, still has no answers, no body, no closure, no last goodbye. Even today, the case remains unsolved. Investigators revisit it, armchair detectives debate it online, survival experts weigh in, but nobody has cracked it. Every logical explanation collapses under its own contradictions. Every clue promises clarity, only to deliver more confusion. The car that could have kept them warm, the trailer that could have kept them fed, the friend who lived the longest, surrounded by resources he didn't use, and the man who vanished without a trace, whose absence feels like the case's final taunt. The legend of the Yuba County Five endures because it reflects something primal: how easily a normal night can turn into a nightmare, how quickly the path home can vanish, and how fragile ordinary decisions can be when fate closes in. The line between routine and eternity, isn't a cliff far away, one wrong turn at night, one snow-covered road, one step deeper into the cold. That's why the story is told again and again as America's Dyatlov Pass, not because it's a simple mystery, but because it holds the same eerie power. Groups of young friends stepping off the map into thin air. Choices that look deliberate but make no sense. Clues that survive but explain nothing. And an ending where silence fills every unanswered question. Stand for a moment in your mind on that mountain road. Picture a car with candy wrappers in the seat and soda cans on the floor. Picture 5 figures climbing into the snow, no jackets, no flashlights, but a strange purpose in each step. Imagine months later, the melted snow revealing bones, a trailer with torn sheets, and a lone body wasted in confusion. Now realize one of them is still missing. One story is still incomplete, and that's why the Yuba County Five case is not only America's Dyatlov Pass. It is one of the scariest glimpses into how quickly normal life can slide into a mystery that never ends.